Us.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Mind Heist episode 132. How are you, bro?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
I'm good. I think, was it last episode? I think I was a bit sniffly. I am still slightly sniffly, but yeah, alhamdulillah. Actually, you know what happened?
Go
My
on.
ear got blocked again. So I can't
Oh,
hear in one of my ears.
oh, it's still
Strange,
like that, yeah?
strange stuff.
Man, I've got really bad hearing anyway. My wife will attest to that. I can't hear much compared to other people. But sometimes my ear does pop and I just start hearing like a normal person and the world is really loud. Because if
Oh,
I have the
really?
TV
Yeah.
on, yeah, if I have the TV on or anything, I've always got it really loud and everybody complains it's really loud, but I can't hear very well at all.
These are the
No,
blessings, man.
honestly,
These are the
honestly.
blessings.
So I got these big headphones on, the volume's up.
Yeah, yeah. I see. I was going to ask you to start off the episode. If you could, okay, your job is like fully remote and you
Uh-huh.
get paid enough to like live in like pretty much any city, even London. Yeah.
Mm.
Where would you live? And like your family and all that is all in the same place as they are now. Where would you live?
Ah. Ah, depends. Okay, I suppose it. I suppose it has to be a Muslim country, doesn't it?
Oh,
Let me
does it?
think. Well, I know, but like, if I was to say a non-Muslim country, I would get flamed and cancelled. They'd be
Well,
like,
maybe you
"Why would
should
you?"
be.
I'm trying to think. I'm not really like. Oh, you know what? I'd live in Morocco, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. When I last went to Morocco, I went to Tangier or Tanja, however you want to
Mm.
pronounce it. And I just had such a nice vibe from it. I've never really explored it properly. I mean, that's where when I go to see my family, that's the airport that I fly to.
Yeah.
But on this occasion, I visited with my wife and with my auntie, and she took us around and stuff. And I was just like, this place is great. It's got the best of both worlds. Like, it's got the old sort of cultural sort of heritage sort of stuff, but then it's also got all the modern amenities. It had a McDonald's there. You know what I mean? Like, it's got a really nice mix, and it's on the coast as well.
Yeah.
Really, really liked it. And it wasn't like, I went to Marrakesh previously, and Marrakesh was fine for the, I don't know, 4 or 5 days that I was there, but I wouldn't want to be there longer than that. It was a bit too much like tourism and too much in your face. But
Yeah.
this was nice, man. This was just, it was made up of the people. So yeah, I think definitely number one would be Anja. How about
Mm.
you? I suppose you're already where you want to be.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I would change. I mean, I guess at this point in my life, I wouldn't. I would be in Istanbul, I
Mm,
suppose. But like sometimes because we said like you can afford to live in any city in the world. I mean, Dubai is one of those cities where it's nice, but costs a ton to live there. Obviously, there
yeah.
are people that live there on less, but you feel there are limitations to living there unless you've got like a lot of money. But no, I still wouldn't live there. What I might do is I might have more of a split, like a 9 month in Istanbul, 3 month elsewhere, or I might have 6 months, 6 months. I don't know. That's what I can think of to be a bit creative here. Uh,
Absolutely.
Like maybe I was even thinking maybe I will do that where I do 3 months Algeria and 9 months Istanbul.
Mm,
It's possible still because I want my I want my kids to feel Algerian. Like if I tell them they're Algerian, I want them to actually like have some reality to that. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah.
And I've seen like my cousins' children who like live in France and grew up in France. I've seen how they benefited from visiting Algeria every single summer for like
Mm,
months. And they actually, and from a young age, like from, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years of age, and some of them even younger than that. I've seen how, initially the first time they came, they were like very quiet, this and that. But 2, 3 years in, they're like, you know, very comfortable with the language, and they're just exposed to something I guess they can identify with because France is constantly telling them, I'm sure, like, you're not one of
mm,
us. So,
yeah.
they need to feel they are of something. And what I think facilitated that a lot is they were able to drive from France to Algeria. And
Mm,
secondly, their dad, so my cousin's husband, bought a house there, so they always had somewhere they could go and stay and have their space, if you like. And it was 5 minutes from his mother-in-law, you know. So you know, these things, I think of these things sometimes, you know, because you can't. I think I don't know if you listened to the episode I did last time with Kaya. It was a really good one about this issue of identity, and it was like, it was kind of like the conclusion we came to was you have to pick some sort of identity for your kids, even if, like, almost to the point where it could be fake. Yeah. Like, tell your kids they're like Turkish or whatever, as long as they feel they're Muslim, and then there's some sort of people or some sort of place their roots go back to. And it almost doesn't matter what roots it is, almost, but to have something. And then on top of that, if they can actually know that place and visit that place, then that gives that confidence or whatever.
It's difficult, obviously, because clashes can come about. Like, there's that famous sort of feeling of not feeling at home anywhere you go. You know, you like in the UK, you don't feel like you belong here. You go back to, you know, I remember going to Tunisia and, like, obviously feeling different. I don't know if that was ego in the way, you know, that like red passport ego that a lot of kids abroad have, or if it was just the interactions I would have with people. And I think it was a bit of both. I think like adults would treat me well and welcome me, but like with kids my age, I always felt like they wanted something from me, right? So I couldn't naturally, you know, befriend them. Like, you know, I remember really being quite, you know, I had an aversion to socializing with people. And until like my parents forced me pretty much to rekindle some sort of relationship I had with a friend who was, who I went to school with, or someone I went to school with. And then he started, you know, came to my house, we played some video games, you know, on the old N64 back then.
Yeah.
And, God, this is years ago. And then like, I just remember at the end of the day, he, like before he went home, he started asking me for money. And I was like under 10 years old, bro. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that was it. That was the last time I spoke to him, because I was just like, this isn't, you know, clearly this is what it's going to be like. So identity, is really important. And I think that's where I started to find myself more when I found others like me in the West, you know. But even saying that, a lot of my friends at the moment are not North African, not Tunisian or Moroccan. However, a couple nights ago, I was sort of reintroduced to a Moroccan guy about my age in my city. Went out for ice cream and we had a chat. Bro, and he's like predominantly speaks Arabic. Like, his English isn't superb, so he's more comfortable speaking Arabic, which was a good excuse for me to start speaking Arabic to this guy. Yeah, because usually that's quite exclusive to when I go home, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I'm so out of it. However, I really enjoyed it. Like, it was a non-judgmental sort of interaction. Like, he wasn't sitting there like laughing at my Arabic, because I could have easily just laughed at his English, right? You know what I mean? Honestly. So
you hit him with the toe.
Exactly, bro. And I realized, like, I started the conversation off with a bit of a Moroccan dialect, trying to sort of interact with him. But then I realized, like, I was slowly, increasingly becoming more and more Tunisian in my speech as the conversation got more complex. However, like, I really enjoyed that sort of interaction, and I was like, you know what, I want more of this. And then when I was in the masjid that same night, I had a Moroccan guy next to me, I had an Egyptian guy next to me, and then we were just sort of talking, and I was like, he's speaking in his accent, I'm speaking in mine, but we're all sort of having a coherent conversation about something quite profound or important. It wasn't just, you know, what's the weather like. I was like, well, you know what, there isn't that much differences between us, and we all can sort of relate, and it's good to have this kind of relationship with people. So it's really important for the kids, definitely, and I definitely agree. Because that feeling of not belonging anywhere, that void will just get filled up with, you know, whoever extends a hand down. That can be anybody with whatever belief and whatever sort of culture they have. And it's really important that you're aware of what your kids have as in terms of influence. Because it's kind of like a lucky dip, bro. Like, my mum always says, like, you know, she praises and thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for like keeping us out of trouble. But she always says, like, although I do it, obviously, I give her a lot of credit for what she's done. She always says, I didn't really do much. And I can see, like, it is a bit of a lucky dip. Like, I could have been hanging out with anybody. I could have ended up doing anything. So subhanAllah, it's dangerous out there, man.
Yeah, that's why dua for your kids is so important. Like, literally from when they're still in their mother's womb, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and at this age, like you can sit down, like at this age, I can sit down with my mum and we'll just be having a laugh and stuff. And I'll say, oh, back in 2004 or 2006 or whatever, when I said I was doing this, well, actually, I ended up, do you know what I mean? I like admit the wrongs I did back then and we'll laugh
yeah,
about it. But back then, she didn't have a clue. Do you know what I mean?
mm.
So it's crazy, subhanallah. It's crazy, man.
Bro, speaking of different countries like to live in and stuff, um, I mean, my general feeling just when I dip into the news and out now and then, and when I speak to even other people living in the UK, there seems to be a feeling that, and we've said this maybe before, like things are moving east, right?
Yeah.
Like when you look at the fastest growing area countries or the countries with the most potential, like what I think of is like, I don't know. I know Ethiopia is like the fastest growing economy in the world, I think. And then there's like Central Asia and obviously towards China, isn't it? I think despite a lot of economic hardship, Turkey's economy grew a lot as well in the last year or two. So, what's your view as somebody who, is and was more, involved in emergency services? What do you think of the UK and the trajectory of the UK? Because
I think,
like just one thing is a bit more context. I was trying to get an appointment for my son to see the doctor, and I don't know, I thought it's something that could be quite urgent, but they're just like, yeah, come. They gave me an appointment in 9 days. And then apparently it's common, like you get an appointment in a month, in 2 months time, and this stuff is kind of crazy to me, so there seems, on the NHS side, it seems like things are getting worse. So what about on what you've seen?
just on that point, you've reminded me, I've been waiting for an appointment so I have like, sometimes I have an issue with my heart and I don't really know what it is. I have like a really low heart rate and my Apple Watch I don't know if I brought it up, but my Apple Watch keeps pinging me that I have a low heart rate all the time. And also I've had like chest pains for a long time. But an ambulance came and took me to hospital and all this stuff. But then they were like, okay, we can't really figure it out, book an appointment. And this was ages ago, like months and months and months ago, and I still haven't heard anything. I know it's gone through and you've reminded me to check, but it's definitely been more than 3 months. So it could be even longer. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. But, I think the caveat to all of this is that there's a bias because I'm very aware of I'm more aware of the politics in this country than I am anywhere else, right? So like, I will always have like this overly cynical and negative opinion of the UK because I'm aware of all the infighting and all the debates and all the troubles that it's having. And then I could look at Turkey, for example, be like, oh yeah, Turkey must be great. Only because I'm not following Turkish news and not following the issues that are going on there, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, when I'm doing this comparison, I'm going to have a negative bias towards England. I'm going to say, England's a mess, right? However, I do see, at least from a Western perspective, so when I say Western, I mean England and, English-speaking world, because that's the media I consume and that's the content I see. There is definitely like this admiration, at least with like right-wing exclusionaries that want foreigners out of their country, right? They want them out of their country, but they still have a very profound fascination with Eastern values, or they admire the East for being able to hold on to particular values. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you ever come across Elliot Hulse.
Of course.
Elliot Hulse. Yeah, I've been following him occasionally, and he's on a bit of a transformation. He's very much like pro-Trump, loves Jesus, lifts weights, that kind of guy, right? Although he's been through all sorts of phases. And I was watching, his thumbnail caught my attention. I got baited into this video where he was doing a Q&A, and like one of the questions was like, what does he think about the Taliban, right? And I was like, this would be interesting. Now straight away I was like, you know what? He's probably going to be in admiration of them, I bet, just because of his going against the grain, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? And that's pretty much exactly what the video was. That clip in the video is about 5-10 minutes. And I remember screen recording. I shared it with some of my Afghan friends, and they started sharing it. And then it kind of went a bit viral on Twitter and stuff. But essentially, what he was like, he's like, in another life, I could probably be a Taliban. He goes, these guys are strong men. They're alpha males. They don't let their kids watch porn. They ban all that stuff in their country. Yada yada yada. Do you know what I mean? They came from war torn families, and their fathers died, and these are the ones ruling the country now are the kids of the ones that died. Back in the anyway. He's like trying to choose his words carefully, and he's answering his question while he's lifting weights. Like he's in the middle of a work, but it's all like. I'm not making a comment on the Taliban, but what I'm saying is like you can see that there's a fascination there growing because within America and maybe within the UK similarly, there is this sort of like identity crisis, like on a major scale. Like suddenly from two genders we've gone to God knows how many, from one particular sexuality we've gone to God knows how many, and it is very much like. Like one, and I mentioned this before, like, certain movements that have been quite popular and, in terms of spearheading progressiveness, such as feminism, for example, are now at odds with those that are coming up now, like the trans rights movements. And it's like the big debate the other day, at least with the Labour Party, was... I think the leader of the Labour Party said something to the effect of you can't not call trans women, right? Something like that. You can't go there. And then a lot of feminists came up saying, no, there's a big difference between a woman and a trans woman, right? Trans women are not real women. And then saying that, basically that sentence is what's the word?
Blasphemy.
Yeah, it's pretty much blasphemy. It's not right. You can't say that. And now everyone's up in arms in that kind of sphere. And you just look at that from an outside perspective. You're like, when you don't have a guiding compass, whether that's, the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or any other sort of black and white rule that doesn't get, the chess pieces don't get moved around or the bar doesn't get moved. When you don't have that, you just spend a lot of your time just fighting each other. You can't agree upon anything and nothing gets done, right?
Yeah.
So I see that, and that's what concerns me about the social, the society's cohesion and what's right. And I think it gets to a point where you feel like everything you do, every social interaction you have, you're like walking on eggshells. To the point where like pronouns, right? Like I've seen at work badges that have pronouns on them, and you can. It's obviously a choice now, but I don't know if it will be in the future. But a choice, you can choose to pick a pronoun and let people know what your pronouns are. And for those, aren't aware, I would be he and his and him, and I assume you would be as well. I mean, but maybe you don't agree with that, and maybe you want to be a her and his, or maybe you don't want to. You want to be non-binary, and you say a they and their. And so, what happens when I say it wrong? And what happens when I keep saying it wrong by accident? Because that's just what my brain is wired to, and suddenly I'm the one in the wrong. And then do you understand what I mean? Like you're walking on eggshells in today's society. It's very difficult.
It's hard to imagine those kind of changes, like what you're saying with pronouns, happening in such a top-down way. Like what you're saying. If you make a mistake, what I would assume is you might get in big trouble if you feel really offended by it, right? But the natural, organic way to implement such a change would be more to be like more forgiving and educate people over time. And it's like it took like 10 years for people to get used to wearing seatbelts. So, it's going to take a long time for you to get used to that. If so why are you enforcing it so strictly from day one?
But I think it's enforced in a sort of peer pressure kind of way, as opposed. So like, okay, everyone I email at the moment, everyone who emails me at work has pronouns in their signature. I don't.
Everyone, yeah.
Pretty much everyone who works within the organization will have pronouns.
Because you're Mohammed, bro. You're not Mo.
But you've got to remember, like, as soon as one person does it, and this is the thing, everybody wants to be on the right side of change.
Yes.
Nobody wants to be an outlier, right? So when they see change coming, they need to get ahead of it and accept it, and because they don't want to, don't want anyone looking at their tweet history, so to speak, as an organization, as an individual, and say, oh, look what this person said. If you like, do you know what? You're familiar with Eminem, right?
Yeah,
obviously, and then a lot of people are, and we don't have to go into his, music, but his lyrics were controversial at the time. Okay, when he was
Always
when he
have
was
been.
yeah, always have been. Okay,
Yeah.
and unapologetically so, right? Now, you know, one of his famous songs, and to be honest, I wouldn't say one. Many of his famous songs talk about beating up his ex-wife or something like that, but in a sort of characterized way, like he's performing as a character as opposed to him saying he did it, right? Anyway, I saw a viral video recently from like a young teenager who obviously didn't grow up with Eminem, and that wasn't norm and PC to them.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, have you seen this Eminem guy that everybody's praising? Have you seen what he used to say in his songs?" And like all of that generation start canceling him. Then all of our generation, the older lot, are looking at that like, this
It's
is who he
Eminem,
is.
dude.
This is Eminem. Like, this is what he does, right?
Yeah.
But because there's a younger generation now that is just on a cancel culture alert, they'll just cancel anybody. I'm not saying Eminem doesn't deserve to be cancelled. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the norm, like we would see Eminem and think that's normal. That's just what he does. Yeah. We wouldn't get too offended by that because we just know that that's like his character or whatever.
Or if you have like a very clear moral compass, you'll know 20 years ago when you heard it that it was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wouldn't take you until now to like really understand it and be, shocked.
It's all topsy turvy, bro. It's I can't remember what I saw earlier today, but it was, like, okay, we've got that kind of cancel culture, right? But then you've got the freedom of being derogatory towards, religions and faiths and Islam and Christianity and whatever. Like that freedom goes untouched. Like people can do that, and they've excessively done that, and they've gone even further at doing that at odds with their own sort of belief of, freedom of practice religion, wear what you want. Do you know what I mean? It's like everything's a bit messy, bro. It's like, for example, at the moment in the UK, there's a big sort of public concern about the safety of women, right? And rightly so, there's obviously the murder of Sarah Everard and others, sexual assault, etc. So there's like this imposing of trying to, empower more women, etc. But at the same time, guilt tripping women who want to wear particular clothes and want to be quote unquote modest and want to abide by Islamic hijab or whatever it is. It's like we strip the women's rights there, but we give the women's rights here. It's all agendas at the end of the day. So nobody's really playing by their own rule book.
Deciding what these exceptions are to the rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is someone deciding, or a certain group of people deciding. What about on the crime side? Because that's what I was actually asking you initially, but it's good that you went on to that stuff as well. Like, is there a feeling that obviously there are always areas where the criminals are ahead of the police, right? That's how they can actually commit crimes.
Yeah,
still.
absolutely.
But is that gap getting wider, or are they catching up to them, or?
What I'll say is like, Turkey, for example, just to give you an example, probably has its own organized criminals, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And everybody everywhere does.
Yeah.
What I will say about organized crime is that there's rules. It's organized. It's in the name, right? And so even in like Muslim countries, organized criminals might have a sense of honor or sense of like,
boundaries.
No honor. Yeah, boundaries. They're not going to go to your house and rob you. I mean, they might, but you've got to be in that game to be a victim of that game,
sure.
Generally speaking, right? However, like, as you mentioned it, I don't hear about serial killers or murderers or school shooters or whatever in Muslim countries. I just don't hear about it. You don't, in a town near us, there was like an attempted school shooting. This is in the UK.
Wow.
And it was, I think he had blanks, right? But still, like in a college or a school, and it's just like, why is that happening here?
That's great.
Right? And then, then I start thinking about school in the UK, and I start thinking about the amount of drugs and knives and all sorts that are just brought into schools even in the UK. I was at a school recently, actually a couple of weeks ago. Imagine, a couple of weeks ago. Was it last week or the week before? Either way. And, I was there and blah, 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 doing what I do. And one of the teachers comes up to us and is like, "Oh, before you leave, we've got a girl in the toilets. She's got a knife on her. She's just been cutting herself." And that's obviously a mental health issue as opposed to a crime issue. But we went to deal with that. But then when we came back, it was like, we found these drugs on these kids, and then they were saying like once they find a little bit of drugs, suddenly it kind of uncovers this can of worms where you find out there's like a whole sort of, not epidemic, but like some big issue running around in the school where there's loads of people involved in dealing drugs. Somebody's exploiting them, someone from outside anyway. So, and school is like a breeding ground for that. It's almost like a prison sometimes, bro, because all you need is one guy in that school to start dealing drugs, and then he can be, and then his friends will see him like, oh, you got new trainers, or you got a new bag, I want a bit of that, and then suddenly that's it. You've captured an audience, right? Now, when you don't have, I don't know what it is, bro. I don't know where the gap is. I can't say in just one podcast where the root cause of all of this is, and I can't say Muslim countries are better because we have Islam. A lot of Muslim countries don't put Islam at the forefront of their minds, right? As they may have used to. But what the clear differences are is this still sense of rules and regs, this still sense of old school sort of cultural norms that haven't been, the goalposts haven't been shifted around too much as compared to. And my theory, like growing up, bro, was always that it's going to get so bad and so violent and so chaotic in the West that the East is going to start looking, the East that was trying to catch up to the West is going to start looking at that scene and be like, when you walk into a room and there's that meme where that guy walks into a room, there's like a big fire in that room and he's like, oh, actually, no, I don't want to do this. And he turns around. That's exactly what's going to happen with the East, bro. I feel like they're going to, all these steps that they've been following, like, the West have implemented this law, we're going to try and implement this law. They've done this, we're going to try and do this. They've given these freedoms, we're going to try and give these freedoms. But suddenly they're going to look at it one day and think, oh my God, that's chaos. What's just happened? No, actually, let's backtrack a little bit, and reassess the situation.
Well, I hope when that happens, they actually look inwards to what they have in terms of guidance from Allah and not, for example, look towards China. I hope that's what happens. My theory, bro, about crime is that it's not very well informed theory, but nonetheless, police or law enforcement will never be able to catch up to crime unless crime is like very minimal. Okay, therefore the only way to keep crime in check is through like people's willingness and self-discipline to not commit the crimes. You could call that education, you could call that social pressure, you could call that many things. You could call that getting rid of poverty as much as possible. Basically you can't rely on law enforcement is the cure, but we need prevention. Like the only way to really minimize crime and live in a safe society is with prevention. And like this obviously it's becoming a global culture, but like when I think of why maybe kids and stuff are committing crimes in the UK, it all goes back to status, the whole online world, like having a status or reputation in the online world, having a lack of relationships with your parents, maybe specifically your dad. All these issues which you can just bring back to like family unit, and other like agendas pushed on people like consumerism, materialism, etc. And even atheism or whatever, the anti-God view of the world or anti-afterlife view of the world. These things I feel like cause people to commit crime more than they would if they just had a normal religion. And once they don't have those boundaries, they don't have the boundaries of fear of the afterlife or shame from their parents or shame from the family. They don't have that. But then they've got all the things that the carrots, if you like. So the sticks are gone, and the carrots of I'm gonna be the guy. I'm gonna be the man in the area. I'm gonna get this, right? I'm gonna get the thing that matters the most, which is this type of car and these type of women and this and that. So the stick's gone and the carrot is like dangling there, and all I have to do, you're telling me all I have to do is like take this white powder and then exchange it for money, and I'll get everything that this society tells me I should have, like to be the top. Well, then Bismillah. Not that word would be used. But
Yeah, and cut those corners. Do you know what? Unfortunately, some people will say Bismillah, won't they? That's the
yeah,
sad reality of it.
yeah.
I'm reading this book at the moment by Akala. I don't know if you can see that. Ooh,
Natives. Okay.
Natives.
Yeah,
Yes.
heard of it.
Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire. And it's interesting. I'm only on
Bro,
like the
you
fourth.
going fancy on us, to be honest.
I'm listening to the audio.
You're
book,
going fancy. You got all these traveling books, anthropology. You said anthropology last episode.
bro. I picked that up from uni, bro. I remember I did all this stuff at uni, and then
Yeah.
I was sort of coming back into my sort of sphere of interaction and stuff in the podcast. But
As you edge towards 30.
well, yeah, exactly. But obviously, like, you know, just typically he's quite obviously he's quite well educated, but when he speaks about these issues, and usually we look at race, for example, as an exclusive thing, but he brings in this idea of class, which I haven't looked into class since, like, you know, GCSE psychology or GCSE sociology, whatever you want to call it. Like, I just haven't looked or thought about class structures in such a long time, to the point where I completely forgot that that's how societies are kind of built, and that's the framework we see societies and inequality and stuff is through class structures. So it made me think about this crime element, because he said, like, he himself is quite an outlier. He's you know, born to a black father and a white mother. He ticked all the boxes of somebody who wasn't meant to be successful, basically, statistically speaking. He was like a A-star student, and, you know, but he's quite a successful entrepreneur at the moment. But he obviously talks about his life and upbringing, how, like, race and class structures had such a big impact on him and the challenges and hurdles that he faced. Obviously, I'm early on the book, but it shows how even being exposed to crime is through those structures, right? Now, going back to what you said about crime, you have to kind of differentiate between what sorts of crime, because one of the biggest crime that goes pretty much unchecked, because you just can't tackle that beast, is fraud. You just can't tackle it. Yet most of the people that commit that kind of crime, especially the ones that get away with it, are suited and booted millionaires, you know? So what do? How do you tackle that? Does that lend itself to the overarching societal facade, so to speak? Or are we just focused too much on, you know, those that are committing violent crime, stabbing each other, robbing each other, working class crime, right? So, like, can we put all our eyes on this sort of crime, this violent crime, and then just ignore all of that? Or is all of that connected to this? And I think it is, bro. You know, putting the spiritual issues to the side, because I do think primarily it's the fear of God in people that is missing. I think first and foremost, because societies wouldn't have survived in the past without that, because then anyone could commit a crime and get away with it every day. Yes or no? Like, you could stab someone and there's no forensics. Rob
There's
them.
no accountability.
There's no accountability. So there was a certain element of honor. Don't shoot the messenger. You fear God. You know, these kind of rules and regulations, right? Among people. And obviously I see that a lot now in the books that I'm reading, which is quite interesting. But going back to what I said, so yes. So, you know, when society is literally forcing people into poverty, because the burden of making the country run, the taxes and the bills and the debts and everything, falls on the working class, right? Whilst the rich getting richer, dodging taxes and dodging this and dodging that. I mean, the Pandora Papers came out. Pandora? Was it Pandora? Yes, it was. Pandora Papers came out and showed you all these world leaders and all these politicians and God knows what else, how much tax they've been dodging by buying offshore companies. We spoke about this last episode and stuff. But it's like, how many people does that equate in the working class? Like, the amount of tax that this person dodged, how many people in the working class had to pay to cover that? And then on top of that, that individual can then go and pay for hospital fees or whatever, everything private, everything expensive, everything top class. Whilst not only are we trying to make the country run for everyone else, but then we also have to rely on you know, the stuff that we're funding ourselves, such as the NHS or such as the police service or whatever. And this inequality and stuff, all of this inequality and dhulm, bro, in this facade, I think that is what fuels people into this mindset of desperation and of having to risk their lives and their futures just to get measly, 200, 300 quid. Do you know what I mean? For a bag of cocaine or whatever, and then always looking over their shoulder. It's a rat race, bro. And you said earlier, like the police are the cure, bro. I think they're a band-aid to a very big scar on this city or the country, bro, in general. And it's like that everywhere. But you said prevention as well. Like, I'm quite aware that the police try and do prevention endeavors and stuff, but the police can never get early enough in that stage to stop it. You know, by the time the police are involved in the prevention, which it isn't really their job, police should only start getting involved when crimes are getting. That's not their job. But that's another thing. The police get involved in everything because there's no one else to do it. For example, like mental health issues, right? You know, when I was working, bro, it's just mental health issues were just all the time. I don't think that we're the best service to deal with, law enforcement are the best service to deal with that. I really don't.
Like you were talking about suicide in one episode.
Yeah,
and it's like,
all the
that's
time.
not a crime.
But all the time, because who else do you go to? Like there's no funding for other services that are better equipped for that. I mean, the best I would say is that there should be more collaboration with law enforcement and those other services. There is a little bit now, but only as much as the pocket can fund, right? I've worked with nurses, mental health nurses and stuff, but like there's just one mental health nurse for the whole city, bro. And it's like only on like a Tuesday and a Thursday. So that's when, if you want to have your mental health crisis, that's when you should have it. And only have it one at a time and take turns, right? That's the only way we're going to cover everybody. But that goes back, bro, mental health issues as well play into this. That goes into the inequality, the facade, the pressures of people, the enslavement, the debt enslavement of people. Like, it's only now that I was thinking of going to Tunisia that I started realizing I can't just pick up and leave. Like my dad was like, you need to go to Tunisia now if you want to go. I was like, look, I physically can't, because I've got a contract on this, I've got a contract on that, I've got a contract on this. Without realizing it, I was actually in debt, and I didn't really think I was. I always prided myself on not being someone who had debts, bro. But then suddenly I realized, do you know how many contracts I've got? I've got my wife's phone contract, I've got my phone contract, I've got my car insurance, I've got the contract for the house. Ooh, suddenly you can't just pick up and go. You've got to pay everything off before you can disappear. So
someone told me a few days ago, they got an iPhone 13. I was like, yeah, you got that big boy money.
Yeah.
He's like, oh no, it's like £30 a month. And then I was like, oh, damn. Because I never buy things like that. But when you hear it, you're like, £30 a month. Yeah, for like 2 years or whatever. And then you start thinking, well, actually, I thought I couldn't afford it, but I can afford that.
Yeah.
And it becomes very tempting. And what I can't even pinpoint, somebody who, really avoids ever paying for stuff in installments and stuff like that, or borrowing money. I can't put my finger on the problem with it, like this specific one, obviously assuming there's no interest in these things. I can't put my finger on what's wrong with it, but like you're saying, there is that element of, maybe it's just that mental element of knowing I've got this to pay every month, and I can't, maybe like you say, pick up and leave. So those are two disadvantages at least. And the third one might be buying things that you don't really need, but because it's made accessible by paying monthly, it's like boom.
And it's like deception of thinking that you need it. Like one thing, I'll give you an example. Like the iPhone, I became so reliant on the iPhone's particular set of apps that I was using for like graphic design, for PureXI, for that kind of stuff back in the day, that I just couldn't think of using anything else. And I was like, I remember just thinking to myself like, oh, this is it. I always have to have an iPhone now because I need to use these specific apps and stuff. And then it's now, bro, like since this has come up and I've realized like you are tied down, like you are, I've got a ball and chain on me. Like I can't leave, bro. I have to pay this stuff off. Some stuff you absolutely have no choice, like renting a property. The best you can do is put a 6-month clause halfway through a year's contract and just say in 6 months, I have an opportunity to leave. And that's probably the only thing. But like, cars, like for example, the car I have, I paid quite a large amount of it, up front, and then the remainder I financed it, 0% interest or whatever, and I did my research, and I think there might be a difference of opinion, but I did my research and went for it regardless. But the reason I bought this car was because my old one was falling apart. I remember I had like water in the back. I don't know where I was coming from. Water in the boot, sloshing around, all this stuff. Anyway, and it was about to go. And I remember a friend of mine, and there's got nothing against him, but what he said really stuck with me. He was like, "Oh, bro, you know what? Because I'd never bought a car I still hadn't bought like I don't know, a decent car for myself since I started driving." And he was like, "You really should do it for your family, bro. You should do it for your family, right?" And that was like the silver bullet that got me, because as soon as you say, "Oh,
those are words to use,"
it's a words to you, yeah. Because, bro, the last car I had, it was in the summer. The air conditioner had gone. I couldn't take my kids anywhere in it because it was just too hot for them. The back windows wouldn't work properly. Anyway, a lot of stuff. So I was like, okay, fine. And I kind of bit the bullet. And now I'm like, do you know what? Did I buy it for my family, or did I buy it just so that, I wouldn't feel bad in front of my friends, or like all my intentions are all over the place. My family benefiting.
People like you, bro, should be going around in at least a 5 Series, bro. At least.
Like me, that my nice
people
money.
like you, bro. that's how they get you. You deserve it, bro.
This is it. And do you know what? It's the first time I've done this, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have, and I should have just pulled what I could have afforded. Something small, something that does the job, and I don't really care what it looks like as long as it does the job, and I paid it off, and that's it. Obviously, I did a bit of both, and I'm not completely too far gone. I could just probably resell it, and now and then and kind of backtrack on that. However, this little taste of, because this is how they get you, bro. This little taste of like, oh, you need this. This is important. That's how they start getting you, especially when it's, I never done anything like this for myself, unless it was like, now even sometimes it could be something like a game console or something like that. But I've always paid that off. Like I've paid those things off. Funnily enough, I paid consoles off that are quite expensive when they first launched straight out. Like I've saved for them in advance because I know they're coming out. So I'm like, I'll save. But now they've got options like, like an Xbox, for example. You can get a new Xbox in the same way that you can get a phone contract for £30 a month, and you just pay that off. And now they've got these, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but like you can go on ASOS, for example, to buy clothes. And on those... Klarna, exactly.
Klarna's everywhere now. I saw that.
Everywhere, bro. That. And it wouldn't work for me, but I'm glad it didn't. I've got alternatives I do. But like PayPal, like, okay, these sofas, bro. I bought sofas when I moved here. I had to get them in a three payment plan. So 3 months, over 3 months, I paid them off. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, they're slowly getting me,
Yeah.
I'm only a few steps away. I don't believe in getting credit cards, but I'm only as a now average customer, I'd only be a few steps away from getting a credit card. And I've spoken to people who have had credit cards and were none the wiser, whether that's family or friends or whatever. And they were like, oh, I didn't really know much about, interest and the halal and haram of it. And my bank, the person I spoke to said, oh, my bank offered me a credit card one day. And I just thought, yeah, okay, I'll take it. And now that person's paying off like thousands of pounds in debt because they just got used to it because they just thought it was normal. And that's what people do.
Yeah. And I mean, many people, non-Muslims, they would advise you to get a credit card to build your credit score. So that in the future you can borrow, you can get better terms for loans and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah,
you're just,
however much it does make sense in the world we live in, right? But then ultimately it doesn't make sense because haram, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So,
but
yeah.
you can see, obviously now I've just felt the big negative of it, which is being tied down.
Yeah.
Suddenly you can't go where you want to go.
Yeah. And I suppose the Prophet ﷺ, like, whether it's in actual words or just in the fact that he didn't pray janazah over someone who had debt, who died with debt, that's an indication that it's not good to have debt unless it's absolutely necessary.
But we all have that now without realizing it. Like phone contracts are the biggest example.
Is that a debt though?
But obviously people can differ, but it's more or less the effects of it. Yes. Like I remember Googling this just as a thought experiment, and I Googled, what happens if I don't pay my phone bill? Like what happens if I just go? I was curious as what they would do.
Just curious.
Well, yeah, because if you call them up and say, I'm going to go, they say, okay, this is your final bill. And they'll just
pay off the rest.
Pay off the rest, right? And then people were just like, oh, that's it. Like it will escalate basically to the point for some people where they'll just get bailiffs to come around and just take your stuff. And if they can't find you anymore, then, I remember my dad, it was either my dad or my mum mentioned that my dad said this, but like somebody that he knew in the old days, back in the days, took out like a credit card from the UK and just like, obviously took out loads of money from it and then disappeared to Tunisia, and that was it. And fair enough, but I mean, fair enough for some people, but for someone like myself who is very conscious that I'm going to die one day and have to answer,
obviously
answer about that.
Accountability in the akhirah for that, but also that guy probably can never go back UK without getting in trouble.
This is it. And if I'm going abroad, bro, to live abroad, I don't want to seal off the necessity for me to come back.
Of course.
I might have to come back. It might not work out. Anything could happen.
Yeah, of course. You want to leave doors open.
Absolutely.
So, that's interesting, bro. Like, I understand if you buy something on installments, like I was saying, the iPhone, I was talking about buying it from Apple directly on installments. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I would say is a debt, right? Because you've said, I'm going to pay you whatever, £800 just over 2 years.
Yep.
What about like, my internet bill? It's a monthly amount. There is no final amount. Monthly amount. I don't think that's a debt, right?
It depends. So I think the difference is, this is in my head, what the cancellation sort of policy looks like, right? So for example, if, for my old internet, when I moved out, I could just cancel it at one point. I say, I'm moving out on this particular date. That's it. And they'll be like, that's it. So I'm paying for a service there. I don't think it's a debt, right? It's not something, it has to have a cancellation sort of element to it. A mobile phone, you can't just say, I'm done with this contract. Can you just cancel it for me now? You can't, because
you have to pay it all off. Yeah.
Especially if they've given you a phone as well. I think maybe with a SIM card, maybe there's more room for maneuvering there.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just say, cancel this card. Like that's fine. But yeah, like you said, like an internet thing, I think you can just leave it. But something you're going to carry on using and take with you, what do you do? And the last big one I fell for was this watch, bro. Remember when I said, I just added it to my phone contract?
Yes.
And now I'm like, wow, that was silly.
Made it?
Yeah, I do. No, I love the watch. But once again, what it's done is just bumped my contract a bit longer, So it's like, I've done it again, haven't I? I've done it again. So from now on, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, bro, no more of this stuff, and I think I'm just going to try and make my phones last as long as they can. I'm not really too fussed anyway. I think when you're growing up and you always want the latest phone or the latest thing that you use the most, right? And I think my sister recently paid off her phone bill, like, despite the fact that she could have, paid it in installments every month. I think she might have had the same sort of notion and just thought, screw it, I'm going to pay it all off in one go.
This is actually good, bro. I mean, I haven't done it really before, but I'm definitely not getting tempted after this conversation.
No, absolutely.
The only area, and obviously it depends, like sometimes you move into a new house, you need furniture, and like you don't have that amount of money in your account. So be it. Maybe it's better to borrow off family and friends rather than from a company, but whatever. But I'm talking about, like, I don't want to get any, borrow money from anyone. I don't want to pay anything on installments. The only thing I can see myself doing that with is a house. Just because if I spend whatever years saving up for a house, it will be, the price has just gone up and all that. Like that is definitely an area maybe I can't escape, but everything else, just in my circumstance anyway, just need to be more patient, I think.
I think, that when I paid for the sofas, because I needed sofas, and like getting secondhand sofas isn't really nice thing to do. Like it's just a bit, I don't know what people have spilt on there or done on there, whatever. But I think a 3 months is a sweet spot of a number, right? Because you can generally plan if you can split the cost of something over 3 months, and it's something really necessary. Even though like sofas, one could argue you could just sit on the floor with it, whatever. Anyway, whatever you want to, whatever your necessities are, or you can sit this.
Yeah.
This is it. So I think if you can afford to split something over 3 months, and then after you've split it in three, you're like, right, I can manage that. That's going to make things easy for me. Then I think that's not too bad, because it's always only going to be 3 months away. You're not going to be, the chances of you having to, cut off that chain within 3 months is quite slim, right? Generally, you'd like to think you have to plan ahead, but also you could always borrow money from someone just to pay that thing off. But anything beyond 3 months, it's like, oh, actually, now I'm tying myself down a bit longer than I need to. Any emergency could happen or whatever. But ultimately, what you'd like to be able to do is just always be able to save money. Now, this is the thing. When you've always got these expenditures going out every month, the phone bill, the car, the this, the that, you can never save any money because there's always money going out to these things. However, if you had saved first, then bought this thing, then you could start saving straight away again after you bought it, right? For the next thing. And Allah knows best. Society doesn't really work that way anymore. At least over here, but then again, is it over here or is it up here? I'm pointing at my brain for the audio listeners. Is it in our heads and our hearts, or is it actually in our environment, or vice versa? Like, where is the problem? Maybe it's both.
I think it depends what we're talking about here. I think a lot of the times when people go, but I know people, real people struggling financially, and they've got 2-3 TVs in their house. Now they might say, oh, the TV was like, oh, it was just like £100, £100 here, £100 there. But the fact you've got those 2-3 TVs, it's proof of the way you're thinking about spending on necessities versus non-necessities, So I think, I'm not talking about who to blame here. There's so many factors, so many variables, but I think we need to really get clear on what is a necessity. We need to stop consuming the types of media that make us feel like we need to buy more things to be happy or to be content or whatever it is. We need to obviously go back to Allah and feel fulfilled from that connection, because that will give you a lot of your needs, Yani. And family and social relations is a big one as well. Like people, it's maybe it's not hit the mainstream in terms of like documentaries and this not being made about it, but I have no doubt in my head that when you're lonely, you buy more material things. When you're lonely, you feel the need actually to spend money. That's why they say it's not actually it's a sick joke of a term. The term retail therapy. That's sick, bro. In a bad way, Yani. Like retail therapy, like that's actually what people are doing. They feel a void and they're spending money, either spending money, taking drugs, whatever it is, to fill the void. So we need to fight back by not having the void in the first place as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Through connections, right? That's why, again, I go back to the book by Johann Hari. It's called Lost Connections, and it's about depression. And it's about how people get depressed because of a lack of connection to other people, but of course, in the first place, to Allah. So, you get people, bro, who feel so close to the Prophet ﷺ. Why? How do they do that? It's from reading about him, learning about him, maybe sending salah on him, maybe asking Allah to unite you with him in Jannah. And so connection is a big one. That's where a lot of the void comes from. And then obviously there are the adverts and this and that. And that's one big thing I always notice when I come to the UK is that selling is so slick here. Like they're good at doing ads and stuff like that. Like obviously they've put a lot of time and effort into optimizing the ad. But then also they make it easy to buy, like we're talking about, like installments and this and that.
But also, like, I mean, not to open this can of worms again, but you've got that whole competition element between people, and that is very much.
I would say that that's linked to the void, though, I think.
Yeah, but it's overdosed on social media. Like there are things that have become unattainable things that have become normalized,
Yeah,
such
for
as
sure.
going on holiday every few months. Sometimes for some people is considered normal,
Yeah.
right?
Or
I know
big
people that,
weddings or
yeah, I know people, bro, that go on holidays every few months. They're just on a holiday somewhere. They've gone somewhere, and then that gets posted. And, oh, look, I'm traveling. Oh, I'm traveling again. Hey, let's put a little travel quote. And then suddenly there's an expectation. Oh, I should be traveling every month. Oh, this year we didn't go on holiday. I'm afraid. No, I didn't. I couldn't afford it. But like, what do you mean this year? Like, we go every year. Like, we need to go every year. And you know what? Looking back on it, bro, I remember one year I went to like 3 or 4 different countries. Um, not because not because I'm that guy. I don't consider myself that guy. But then when I look back on it, I was like, man, I must have spent so much money to do stuff like that. Why did I do that? That's crazy. And obviously, one could argue I've got family all over now, so I have to. I've got family in Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco. Fair enough. But for some people, it's not that. Some people, it's just think of the credit cards that they're spending to fulfill that sort of,
yeah.
and whether there's buying new clothes or buying, bro, akhi, wallahi al-azim, akhi, I've got clothes from 5, 6 years ago that I still wear, like, and that's just because I took my head out of that environment because I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not the bachelor running around with my mates and they're always buying clothes and we go out clothes shopping. Because I'm out of that environment completely now, I don't have this desire to buy clothes all the time. However, we did speak about this many episodes ago when I was a young strapping lad running around with my mates. I did go into they introduced me to all these designer clothes and stuff. And I remember every week I was buying new clothes, bro, because that's the environment. That's the people that I mixed with,
Yeah.
So,
And then
when
the
you're not
same
there-
applies for cars. The same applies for, oh, have you not got a house yet?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
oh no. Oh, what?
They're never getting me with that one, bro. They can't.
This is some of the defenses you can put up is, like you're saying, the company you keep.
Yeah.
And also sometimes, bro, like what I guess benefited from is a kind of embracing the identity of the frugal person. So it's like people don't expect that of me, and therefore they can't pressure me because it's like, oh, of course he's not got XYZ. That's one way, is just embrace it as an identity, if you like.
Yeah.
But then also,
Normalize frugalness. Hashtag normalize frugalness.
well, yeah, definitely. Budgeting helps as well. Like, what I do? This is another one. It's like, okay, everyone around me has got whatever, a nicer car. Yeah. But I'm like, I know what's in my bank account. And I assume, obviously, I'm not assuming in terms of, oh yeah, they suck. But I just know that the average person has very little money actually in their bank account. They've got, they got the cars, the phones, the clothes, and this and that, the holidays, but they haven't got much money in their bank account. They're actually in the negative, like you're saying, they're tied down. So
Yeah.
whenever I ever feel that kind of thing of, oh, like, why have I not got that? I just think, okay, my bank account's like that, theirs is like that, and their credit cards are probably like that, and I don't even have credit cards, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I do that kind of thinking to help me as well.
Mm.
And also, something to mention, since we mentioned Klarna, is I'm pretty sure Klarna is haram, because when you sign up for that, the agreement is haram, because you're agreeing that if you miss a payment, you're going to pay interest on the next payment. And by the way, it's like crazy levels of interest.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like those, what's it, Wonga? These
Oh, I
payday
remember
loans.
those, yeah.
It's that level of interest, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this like with that much confidence, because I remember Sheikh Haytham was doing a webinar on these things, and he was kind of saying that Klarna was one of them ones mentioned. Because with these things, you always have to look at the clauses, and if there's any agreement to pay interest, then that's dodgy.
Well, this is it, and obviously there's wisdom behind all of that, because otherwise you're enslaved to the debt collector as opposed to enslaving yourself to.
And then all this goes to a macro level. Like, we're talking about day-to-day people, your own bank account, but this now goes to nation levels as well, where we all you've heard of this, like the Economic Hitman, that book that is quite popular, about how countries are enslaved by debt, and how certain countries in sub-Saharan Africa, they're still paying debts to France, like not even debt, it's like kind of like royalties or something crazy insane. And then there's actual debt, like from the IMF, from the what's it called, World Bank. These as far as I'm concerned, Shaitani institutions, where I'm not going to explain it. Like, actually, if you YouTube it, Economic Hitman, I think there's a good summary of how it works.
Okay.
And countries are enslaved, and then people get enslaved. So this is one of I feel it's like the big, like people are looking for these big conspiracy theories. Like, this is the one. It's not a theory. It's real.
But this is why, like, going all the way back to what we started with, the conversation about the crime element, right?
Yes,
there is always going to be, all these organizations, these institutions, everything with a brand name, or everything with a recognizable name. What do they call it? What's the saying? Oh, I don't know. It's not dinner table name. I don't know what the word is called. Anyway.
Household name.
Household name. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Anything with a household name, bro, has got some big wig, millionaire at the top end of it, right? So they're going to ideally have their interests at heart. And those interests are going to be to not pay their taxes, to do these things on the slide, to try and so they're going to focus on all the little guy. It was the same thing with climate change, bro. Climate change, I realize it's all these big, massive organizations that are committing the most atrocities, whether you want to believe in climate change or not. But then all the focus was, the working man, make sure you carpool and take a bus and recycle your bits. Don't look over here at what we're doing to the entire environment, all the overfishing or the polluting the oceans or all of that. No. Make sure you separate your tins and your cardboard.
Yeah,
you little guy.
Yeah,
because you could have a real big impact, you little guy.
And that doesn't negate, obviously, our individual responsibility, but it's like, I've heard this myself as well. Like, the actual big levers to help with the environment is what companies or maybe governments are doing rather than the individual.
We've got big knife crime epidemic in London. We've got people stabbing each other and blah, blah, blah. This is horrendous. What we need to do is put this in and that in, right? Whoa, what about all the money that could have been used to, I don't know, build youth centers or support families so they wouldn't have economic problems, so they don't end up divorcing, so we don't have single parent families, all this other stuff. Some bloody countries consider women who work at, housewives as a profession, and they get paid a salary for it, right? Imagine that in a...
Which country is that?
I remember somewhere in Africa, bro. Somewhere in Africa. I remember reading it. But that's... that straight away is like, that's incentive for a parent to always be at home, for a parent to be there, to be, because
you
a lot
can
of
imagine the benefits on the children.
Because imagine, not only a single parent family, imagine a mother, she's got boys, right? And she has to go to work, and she's got to work more than one job, that she's never around to be there for her kids. And suddenly, the elders on the block are the ones that start running.
Yeah.
All of these things. And then,
relationships are void.
Yeah. And then, it's all of this, and bro, not even to go too conspiracy on it, but like, let's not deny the fact, and I'm sure it is a fact, that all of these bigwigs are also benefiting from the illicit crime that goes on, such as, the drugs trade, the weapons trade, the underground stuff, like the black market. Who's bringing? There's people with their hands in those pockets that are clean on the outside, but behind their backs they got dirty money.
Yeah,
of course they do.
Yeah.
So. It's fitna and fasad, bro, and it all starts for the little person for the Muslim, the small layman Muslim, to avoid this stuff. It is with talking about these kind of things. We don't want to get involved in that kind of stuff. But the dust of this fasad, bro, touches everything. How many £20 notes have you touched that's probably blood money, or do you know what I mean, drug money, or you just it's rampant in this day and age, subhanallah.
Yeah. Damn, what was I gonna say, man? One thing, this is a bit of a tangent, but speaking of conspiracy theories, you've probably most people listening, they've heard of Facebook and the issues with Facebook and how Facebook is bad and blah blah.
Yeah.
What seems to be happening now is, especially I think it's since Biden going to the White House, they're pushing for not just Facebook, but I guess all social media platforms to be kind of more managed by governments rather than themselves, right? It's like, okay, use of social media is so widespread that now it's like it needs to be regulated, like what goes out there, what doesn't go out there. And up until now, I don't think there are any laws against it. It's just Facebook has chosen to remove for example, I don't know, like violent videos or whatever from Instagram, Facebook, etc. But what might happen, what I could see happening, is the government getting involved to now censor and decide what should and shouldn't be on social media. And that becomes very scary now, because it's like that was the democratizing force that, oh, we can say what we want, that's our outlet, that's our organizing platform. But now if they start deciding, oh, if you write Palestine in your post, then that's fake news and stuff, that's kind of scary. And because it's like, when everything goes digital, if it's something like blockchain and this and that, then of course it is decentralized, no one can control it. But if it's centralized, like it's on one platform, it can become prey to this kind of control, whether it's the corporation controlling, and we already know that Facebook has certain biases to certain topics, but the worst maybe is the government controlling it. And I say that in the current context. I'm not saying always the government shouldn't be involved, but in the current context of, like the US government, since Facebook's based in the US, Twitter, Snapchat, they're all based in the US, YouTube's based in the US. The US government getting involved, it does become a bit worrying.
For those that are partaking or rely on that kind of stuff, though, isn't it? Like, maybe for yourself, for example, in marketing and the job that you do, there are going to be a lot of platforms and a lot of outlets that you require to do your day job that can then suddenly be affected by, I'd argue maybe you're working for a particular business.
Though here, like,
but I think, does it affect everyone in the same way? Like, does it affect does it affect someone like Sharif who's living off grid and doesn't necessarily need, I mean, he probably, he taught English, didn't he? He taught English online.
Yeah.
So he might not need, to have a personal, like, open conversation on Facebook about his views and opinions, right? So for certain people, oh, this is what Facebook's doing now. Well, delete my account, and that's the end of that. And for a lot of people, it's the same.
But this is the thing. Where do you get your information from, right? Because if the TV is like, either government or that corporation's agenda on it, magazines the same, social media is the same. It's like, where how much I go now?
Do you know, at the same time though, it's like, what information do you need to live your day job? There is that. Someone wrote a comment on one of our videos once when I was speaking about, we did an episode where I mentioned about how I like to watch TED Talks about random information, right? And I find it beneficial. I remember someone wrote a comment saying, you know what? They're basically countering what I said, saying, actually, I don't think that's beneficial at all. I think there's no point. Like, it's almost like you're convincing yourself that what you're learning is important, but actually you're just learning random bits of useless information, which I sort of thought, maybe you're right. Like, none of this stuff is actually going to benefit. Like me knowing, how flipping worms reproduce or something, for example, there's a random TED talk, but me looking at that isn't really going to change my life, right? So it's like you said, information, where'd you get information from? I'm like, how much information do I need? Like, do I need to know about what's going on in the world? Do I need to know about what's going on in the country? Maybe, but only to a certain point, How did people do it before, where they just spoke to each other? Like, unless they can start, what's the word? Monitoring what we can say to each other in person, that's a different story. But maybe we need to go back to that kind of thing. But at the same time, bro, governments controlling these things is in my opinion, something that should be done. Something that would be done regardless of how far in the future we get, because nothing can grow this big without somebody coming in and taking over. Now, the issue we've got is that we're non-Muslims consuming or using, we're Muslims using non-Muslim technology, etc. We're reliant upon them. So we want to keep our voices on these non-Muslim platforms or whatever it is. However, hypothetically speaking, if America was, Dar es-Salaam, so to speak, and, it was, a great Muslim country and it developed all these Facebooks and whatever. And then there was all these people that are putting stuff up that undermines the state. I'd be like, yeah, shut them up. you know. And then that's exactly the point of view that they're looking at it from. So I don't blame them for going down that road. In fact, it makes sense to me that they would go down that road. And for me to complain about it is being a bit, you know, what's the word? What am I thinking? It's just being a bit like wanting to have my cake and eat it. You know, I want to, I don't know how to best phrase it, but like, I'm like surprised and outraged that they would do such a thing as control their, but then I would expect the same thing if
course,
if it benefited me, right?
I'm not saying that. I agree with you, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
I was thinking, when I was saying that, I was thinking, well, if a good person, like a good government was controlling the information, flow of information, then I would agree with that. It's only when they're not good that I don't agree with it. So it's hard for me to come to a conclusion of should it have that power or not, right? Because either you believe a government should control or shouldn't control.
Yeah.
You can't say it depends who's in control of it. But the main issue I feel is, because you're right, you can just switch it off. You can,
for a lot of people. Some people can't. Some people need to make huge adjustments to their lives to switch it off.
Yeah, definitely. But let's say you switch off, right? Now you've got this issue of where do you get your information from? So you might get your information from friends, family, but they're getting it from the social media, right?
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is that if most of society is getting information from these sources that are censored, you could say, or controlled, it means people are going to start to affect your life because they believe certain things that they've been told, right? Like we know that, I remember on WhatsApp, there was this thing going on in India where this like he said, she said thing was being passed around WhatsApp, and a few people were actually hunted down and killed by the mob.
I understand.
Right, based on that. That's one thing. But also it's like certain people's genuine, legitimate concerns or opinions on, for example, coronavirus vaccines, they're actually already being censored and shut down.
Yeah, right? They are definitely.
So just
like
it's not
YouTube
about,
is demonetizing people that are going against the grain and stuff like that.
Yeah, or even just purely taking it down.
Yeah.
Right. I think it was Twitter who just purely, like a real doctor. Yeah, I think an American doctor. His video was like taken down. Why? It's not because it was scientifically inaccurate. It's purely because it didn't conform to the either mainstream view or the World Health Organization view or whatever. So now it's like, okay, if everyone in the world is consuming that, even if I'm not, they're going to affect me, you know? I'm just saying these are things to, you know, maybe it's my interest in the future, and it's something to look at
although
as a trend.
It is interesting though, because I hate to bring it up again, but like studying the history of the world as I'm trying to do now, it's like, you know, last episode we spoke about Ibn Fadlan and the Vikings and all of that.
Yeah.
I've gone to the next chapter now, which is someone called Abu Hamid, and he's like a few hundred years later, but in the same area.
Okay.
And he's like talking about the same place that Ibn Fadlan was talking about, but suddenly all of these people are Muslim now, and they've got a completely different culture, and they've got a complete. And I was just like, that's amazing.
Yeah,
like,
wow.
Because on one page I was reading about, oh, these people are this and that and that, and then the next page is like this other guy's revisited, you know, on a completely different context, not revisiting just because Ibn Fadlan went there, but revisiting on a different mission, different context, but his descriptions are completely different, you know, to the and it's like تلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس, right? And it's just like, you know, let's not forget, bro, like I think I fall victim to the whole, you know, the like cyberpunk futuristic imagery of like the future, and there's a big Facebook hologram and this and flying cars and stuff. I'm like, do you know what? We might get to that future. Allah knows best, but it might not be America leading the party. You know, it might be someone completely different. You know, it could be Kenya. You know, it could be anyone. It could be anyone. Allah knows best, bro. So like, you know, when people, and we need to look for the signs of like people, the rise and then the murmur before the sharp fall, right? And that's what kind of happens. And some of the things we see now, we could easily attribute it to being, you know, moments before a big collapse of any sort of world superpower or leader of the world or whatever, and then we have to start all over again. Like the great resets of the past were like some of the world wars, bro, that completely shaped countries and completely shaped societies, you know. You know, the
World
way
War
that,
Two pretty much made the world
yeah,
the way it is today.
exactly, bro. The way that they came out of the ashes of World War Two, you know, the post-war sort of boom that led on to like the golden eras of the 60s and 70s,
Yes.
maybe just the 70s. I don't know, that kind of era, bro, where like, you know, business was booming and the what was it called, the American dream and all this stuff, bro. Like when you look at that kind of history, like they came through that hardship and then suddenly they became a superpower, bro. Like people, you know, the old husband wakes up in the morning, goes to work and in the car factory, and then comes home and his wife's square. That kind of life, bro, where it's like the golden age of America, comparing it to now. And then other countries will have their golden ages, and you read about, you know, Muslims of the past and their quote unquote golden ages, economically speaking. Allah knows best about the religion. Because we'd say the religious golden age is obviously the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the four rightly guided caliphs afterwards. But a lot of people say, oh, the golden age of Islam was Spain, Muslim Spain. Well, that's a different story. But
It's relative, I guess.
it's relative in a way. If you want to compare the world to what it is today, you know, yes, we were like the America of, you know, the world at the time, or whatever you want to call it. Same with Baghdad, bro. Man, you know, the ransacking of Baghdad with the Mongols and all of that. And think of that as like America now. Think of Baghdad as America is today. And then suddenly there's blood in the streets, bro. And it's just gone. And that's it. And there's nothing left in that sense.
Yeah.
And that could easily happen, you know? You never watched Independence Day, bro? Imagine if the aliens won. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of like what it would be. But these are just thoughts experiments. And, you know.
You know, before we wrap up, I just remembered, because we were talking about poverty and jobs and getting into debt and stuff. Yeah, there does seem, I've been noticing this. I've been hearing these things here and there, yeah, for a year or so, and I guess this has been going on for a while. There is huge opportunity right now in the UK, maybe in other countries, similar kind of countries, but definitely in the UK.
Sure.
You know, like with the lack of the ease of immigrants coming from the EU now, there's so many jobs, bro. There's so many jobs. I saw Al Jazeera reported on a job, basically farming job, picking lettuce. Okay. Whatever, is it called picking lettuce? Whatever it is,
Yeah,
harvesting, yeah. £70,000 a year.
Sign me up, baby.
I don't know if they need you for a year. It might be a few months.
Yeah,
but that's like
pro rata, whatever they call it.
6K a month, right?
Sign me up.
You've got jobs like plumbing and landscaping and, you know, electrician kind of stuff. These jobs, they pay
I have my
well.
British passport, bro. I run up there with my British passport. We're like, yep.
Yeah,
Sign me up.
no visa. Yeah, bro. These and then even people doing like Deliveroo and Uber Eats are making a lot of money.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money out there, bro. But why, you know, then some people say that, right? And no doubt there are these big opportunities, right? But why do these people, the poor people, why don't they just go and get them then? Are they lazy? But I think the truth is that sometimes people are, the culture they're in and the kind of area of the city they're in, they don't learn about these things, or something sometimes stops them. Sometimes, bro, it's even just some limitation of the mind, some sort of lack of confidence, some sort of lack of education.
It was also the security issue, bro. It was like the lack of security with these kind of jobs, because they really do just need to use you and lose you. You know, they don't want to bring you in as part of the family, so to speak, and look after you. They just want your blood, sweat and tears, and they'll chuck you out. Like this whole thing about the trucks and the HGV drivers, they were giving out visas that will end on Christmas Eve. Now, a lot of Eastern European workers, whatever, that typically would come to England and work those jobs, are like, no, like that's not secure for me. Like I want to be home when I need to be home. I want to be. Do you understand? Like I want to. There's nothing in it for them, you know. A lot of people would see those opportunities and those jobs as an excuse to come to the UK and settle and whatever, and continue working here long term and send money back home. But then when you're just going to get kicked out, then you're just going to get kicked out, you know.
But what about the UK people though?
That want to do it.
I'm saying like a truck driver is going to get paid good, right? Especially when they're desperate for them. And now you're working like either no job or a badly paid job. Like you have these opportunities to grab, but at the same time, I'm acknowledging that there will be other barriers. It's not just the fact of there's no jobs. Having no jobs is not the only barrier that stops people getting jobs. There are other things in place, of course. Like sometimes to start a new job, you have to move to a new city. It costs a lot of money to move to a new city.
Absolutely.
I don't have that money. No one I know has that money. That could be a reason, for example. But I don't know, if anyone listening, looking for opportunity, go grab it.
Pick some letters, baby.
Sometimes 1 year of hard work in an undesirable field can actually change your financial future.
No, I agree.
So, yeah.
My father did that. So both my parents, we did that kind of work. And with the intent, despite the fact they're educated, at levels that they don't necessarily need to do that. But because of that ability to just work so much, especially back in those days, just send that money back home and build what they built back home. Like that was the mission, bro,
Yeah.
So
changing.
For a lot of people, that is an opportunity. I can see my son is trying to break his way in, despite being 1 year old. But I think I have to go, bro. I have to drive up to London now, inshallah.
Inshallah. Tariq Salam, inshallah. Okay, this has been episode 132. Go to mindhousepodcast.com if you want to contact us anonymously or otherwise. Find us on Instagram, etc. over there. And subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik, shadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. See you in the next one, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.